Hi, guys. Welcome to the very first episode of the Chronicles of the King podcast. I'm Tessa.
And I'm Megan, and we're really happy that you guys are joining us for our first episode.
Yeah, so we just wanted to give a little introduction at
Yep.
first. So, like I said, I'm Tessa. I am 25 and I currently live in upstate New York. I got a master's degree in vocal performance in Ohio. And so I'm a singer. That's who I am as a person. A little bit about how I became an Elvis fan. My mom has been a fan for my whole life, but to be honest, I never really cared. We have like a Heartbreak Hotel Christmas ornament. And I kind of was like, okay, that's just my mom's thing. She had
Yeah.
a Love Me Tender pillow. And I just was like, whatever. And 2 years ago, I went to go see the Elvis movie. My best friend Maggie texted me and she was like, can we go see that movie? And I said, yeah, I guess. I had not no interest, but I was kind of like, okay, I saw the
Mhm.
ads on Hulu. And I went to go see the movie, and then I got COVID at that movie, and then I was just home and bedridden. So I had nothing to do except deep dive into Elvis
Mhm.
and read books about Elvis and watch Elvis movies and listen to Elvis music and do this and do that, you know. And 2 years ago, hasn't really stopped since. And I just went to Graceland for the first time at the end of February, which was awesome. Can't wait to go back.
Yeah, me too. So I'm Megan. I'm 21. I'm from Maryland, and my degree was in history, and I got that from Liberty University. And so I'm really obsessed with anything Americana. I love mid-century culture. I love the music, the style, whatever it is, I love it. And so that's kind of what I feel like also sparked a bit of my Elvis journey. When I became an Elvis fan, I was 14. So, geez, what is this now? Several years ago, 8 years ago. Thank you for the math.
I actually think
So
that was incorrect math. 7.
it will be eight, I think. I was almost 15. It was close enough.
Okay. That's like,
We're
that's
gonna
not
age
right.
myself here. It's close.
I'm a musician,
Um,
not a mathematician. Okay.
hey, that's yeah, history over here, not math. But no, so I was 14 when I became an Elvis fan. My mom was an Elvis fan when she was younger and she became an Elvis fan through my Aunt Naomi, who first handed her a copy of Elvis and Me. So my mom got addicted to Elvis and Me. She watched the Elvis and Me TV movie when it came out. And when I was 14, she got a kind of a sketchy copy of it. I was bored. I said, let me figure out what this is all about. What is she so crazy about Elvis for? And I sat down, I watched with her, and ever since then, I was hooked. And so that Christmas, I got my first Elvis and Me book. After that, I read several other Elvis books, and I even started a book club for it. So that's kind of my Elvis journey.
Yeah, and so through Megan's book club is actually how we met.
Yeah.
I was looking after going to Graceland. I felt like so my Elvis stuff started 2 years ago, and then it kind
Yep.
of waned a little bit. You know, I had other obsessions, had my other moments, my Breaking
Hmm.
Bad era, for example. And
Yep.
then I went to Graceland, and I was like, wow, like I really did read a lot of books about this and know a lot about
Hmm.
this. And I wanted to find other people who were like me. Somehow her account came up, and then we got to chatting. And one day I just texted her and I was like, I have been dying to do a podcast because I just want to talk about
Hmm.
Elvis. I love talking about Elvis. And I feel like I've read all these books and
Hmm.
all this information is floating in my head and who to talk to about it. So that's kind of how we
Yeah.
met and how we came up with the idea to talk about something that we're passionate about, that we love,
Hmm.
and we love to research, we love to read about. Um,
Absolutely. We
yeah,
love
so
those
that's
primary sources.
love a primary source.
Love
So
the primary
that's
sources. Yeah, and so with Tessa's background in music, my background in history, we just thought this would be the ideal combo to bring you all some Elvis knowledge that you may or may not have known.
right.
Yeah.
And one of the big things for us is we wanted to make sure that our stuff was pretty well researched. Of course,
Hmm.
we are not perfect.
We're
There
not
is
perfect.
definitely bound to be a mistake here or there, disclaimer.
Yes.
But I promise you, we are trying our best. We have done our research.
Hmm.
Um, we're both passionate about accuracy, about history, about keeping
Yeah.
things clear and not necessarily coming to conclusions, although I'm sure we'll
Hmm.
have our own opinions. But
Yeah.
just sharing information that we've learned
Hmm.
in a kind of academic way. I feel
In an
like that
academic
was
way. We want to provide some information.
right. And obviously we have thoughts, but we were like,
Yeah.
I think it would be cool to have a platform where we can talk
Hmm.
about research and it gives us something to do, gives us
It
something
does
to
give us.
research,
Yeah, and like
quenches
it's
that academic thirst.
thirst, exactly. And like I said, we're like you said before, we're not perfect. A lot of these sources are based off of people who are not perfect in themselves. So some of these things you have to take for a grain of salt. There could be somebody who says one thing, another person says another. We're here to provide you both, and you may come to a conclusion that's similar to us. You may come to a different conclusion, but that's the beauty of this podcast.
Yeah. And that was also why we started with the title, The Chronicles of the
Mm,
King, because we wanted to keep things pretty chronological,
yes.
historical, and we have some really exciting things in store. I'm so excited to keep going with this and do our research
Mhm.
and talk to people.
Yes.
I'm very excited for that. So,
Yeah. So should we dive right in?
yeah. So, what
Okay.
is our first topic? Let's tell the
All right.
folks.
So we are talking about how Elvis got his start. So this is our first podcast. What better way to talk about Elvis than, going from the beginning?
From the
So
beginning.
from the beginning, and again, Chronicles of the King. So we keep things chronologically.
Okay. Tell me what happened January 8th, 1935.
January 8th, 1935. What a big day for all Elvis fans. That was that was the day of Elvis's glorious birth right there. Two
Glorious is crazy.
glorious. I think it can be glorious. I
Yeah,
mean, I feel like Vernon definitely thought it was glorious, maybe, because
sure.
in the beginning, we have Vernon kind of telling us that his twin, and we don't know which order they were born, but he had a twin, Jesse Garin, Elvis Aaron, if you knew. Um, but his twin was stillborn. So I guess you could say Elvis had a bit of a glorious birth because he was the only surviving twin.
And I've actually read a couple places because people, I think in like the 2022 Elvis movie, they made it seem
Mhm.
like they didn't know they were having twins. But I've read a couple sources that have said that they did know they were having twins because
Mhm.
twins ran in both Vernon, who's Elvis's father, and Gladys, who's Elvis's
Yep.
mother. They ran in both of their families. Um, so they were pretty aware, I think, that they were having twins.
Hmm.
Sadly, his twin brother, Jesse Garin, was stillborn.
Hmm.
Um, and they were born in Tupelo, Mississippi.
Yes. And I believe many Elvis fans have gone to the birthplace house. So it is that very home. It is a shotgun home. So meaning you can shoot a shotgun from one end to the other. It's very, very small. Most people say it could fit into the living room now of Graceland. So just a little bit of comparison there. And the exact address, the old address for it was 306 Old Saltillo Drive. Is that how we're going to say pronouncing
Yeah, I
it?
think it's Saltillo
Okay.
or
Okay.
Saltillo. I don't know. Guys, correct
We'll
us if
go
we're
with it.
wrong. We don't
Please
know.
correct us. Provide us some kind of pronunciation key.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it was built by Elvis's grandfather, his
Mhm.
uncle, and his father with a loan that they had gotten.
Yep.
And it
And
is pretty small. It's known
it's very
now
small.
as the birthplace. That's it.
Birthplace. No
Very
context,
cool.
just the birthplace.
The birthplace. I
The,
went to
the.
the Ohio State University, so I get it.
Well then, the.
THE.
Yes. Well, so they didn't live there very long. They only lived there for about 3 years because the family then lost the home in 1938 when Vernon went to jail for altering a check.
Right. And then they lived in various houses in
Hmm.
Tupelo until 1948 when they moved to
Yep.
Memphis. More to come.
More to come of the places he lived. But that original check was for $4. And there's some people that kind of speculate what kind of alterations were made. They don't know if it was made for $14, adding that one, or if it was made out to be $40, adding that zero.
Right. And Vernon wasn't alone in
Hmm.
altering this check. There were two other men, and they were all incarcerated at Parchman Farm, which is the Mississippi
Yep.
State Penitentiary. And Vernon served 8 months behind bars.
Yes. And kind of, we wanted to, me being a bit of a history buff here, we wanted to provide some kind of perspective about this situation. So at this time, the country is going through the Great Depression. So there's lots of unemployment. To put in perspective, the employment rate during 1935 was actually 20.1% versus the unemployment rate now in as of July 2024, which is 4.3%. So again, putting in perspective, there were a lot of people who were without jobs. There wasn't the social welfare net that we have today. So there weren't people, nobody was working. There was not really any opportunities for work. And so that, of course, led to Vernon altering that check.
Right. And I think it's a really interesting thing that people don't, if you're not like a huge Elvis fan, you might not know
Hmm.
that his father was incarcerated.
Yeah.
And it's an issue that we're still dealing with today. A lot of children have parents who are incarcerated.
Hmm.
And for someone who became such a huge thing, and they never denied that that's what happened. You know,
Hmm.
they kept it clear that that's what happened, but they tried not to let it taint any of Elvis's image. I think it
Yes.
just made them all the more human. So,
Agreed. And like you said, they were just like your typical family, I feel like back then. And like you said, that goes to show that they were human. And at this point, they were attending the Assembly of God Church. And Tessa,
right.
would you like to tell kind of how the story takes place there?
Sure. So the story goes that, well, Gladys said that a 2-year-old Elvis would jump out of her lap and join the choir to sing. This is a well known story. It demonstrates the idea
Hmm.
that Elvis was big into music from an early age, that it had a profound
Yeah.
effect upon him. But particularly the church music was where he got most of the music at the time,
Hmm.
in his early upbringing. That's where he found most of
Yeah.
the music.
And so I think that's the biggest thing that really had, well, the first thing really that had an impact on him. And if you're saying from the age of 2, if he's getting up and he's dancing in the aisles, the music was moving him at that age. I think there was a bit of a premonition about what was to come. And later on, in a 1956 interview for the New York Daily Mirror, Elvis went on to say, I sang some with my folks in the Assembly of God church choir, but it was a small church, so you couldn't sing too loud.
And the church is
Yeah.
still there today, and it's not
Hmm.
much bigger than the birthplace. I mean, it is a
No.
small building.
Yeah.
Um, and it was a so-called, I'm going to use quotations here, it was a holy roller church. Elvis didn't love
Yeah.
that terminology, but I think it's the one we're most familiar with when referencing this kind
Hmm.
of church, where you do have people speak in tongues and have, visions and things like that. It was a
Hmm.
very embodied kind of practice of religion.
Yes.
um, Musically, you would move, um, and that
Much
was kind
like,
of a first indication.
hmm, like visually think of, I feel like most people are going to be familiar with the Elvis movie from 2022. Think about that scene where Elvis is kind of sneaking in to the African American congregation and they're having their revival meeting. And everybody's, getting off their chairs, everybody's moving and, with the spirit to say.
Right.
That's what you should
And
envision.
this movement obviously causes a ruckus and a half, in the 50s. But in 1956, the Presley parents of Vernon and Gladys
Hmm.
were interviewed about what they thought about Elvis's very embodied, impassioned
Yeah.
performances. And this is from that same Daily Mirror interview in September
Hmm.
1956. The author writes, the Presleys see nothing wrong with their sons twitching and twisting on stage. Quote, even when he was a tiny kid and we sang at church and camp meetings, Elvis moved around and acted out his songs, Mrs. Presley said. He's always had a lot of energy and he's big now and gets rid of it in his music. When he sings, he's being himself, and that's not bad or wrong. Vernon recalled more about young Elvis singing. Quote, at 9, he was picked to sing alone in church, he said. At home, we sang as a trio when Gladys wasn't playing the harmonica. Elvis always had a natural talent. He can't read a note even now, but you don't have to teach a fish to swim.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a perfect example of perfect primary and kind of secondary source, showing that Elvis was very influenced by music in his home life. So you have Vernon singing, you have Gladys singing. And if you didn't know, now you do, that Gladys played the harmonica. So it wasn't just something that he kind of was interested in. It was something that he was raised with. He lived it for the most of his life,
Right.
whether it
And
was in church, at home.
yeah, definitely. It was around him everywhere. It was very prevalent in the
Mhm.
culture. And Gladys, this is also from that same interview. She
Yep.
remembers a time when she took Elvis to the fair in Tupelo. And
Mhm.
after hearing a guitarist sing a song, Elvis apparently told his mother, I can sing better than that. And according to Vernon, he just walked right up on that platform, his
Yep.
legs shaking a little, and sang that song without
Mhm.
any accompaniment with a real powerful voice, added Gladys. And he did sing it better than that guitarist. I
Yeah.
mean, if they were still in Tupelo, he was less than
Mhm.
13. He was really young.
Exactly. So,
I
I mean,
love
it's
that
going to
story.
take some, I do too. It's got to take some real willpower and real courage to, like I said, less than 13 years old, get up in front of a group of, probably hundreds of people just to sing and kind of prove your point.
And that self-confidence of I can sing better than
Yes,
that. I
I can do
mean,
it.
I get it. Like, I think when I was 13, I definitely felt the same
Mhm.
things. If I saw people like busking on the street, I was like, I can sing better than
I
that.
can do that.
So,
Yeah.
but I don't know that I actually ever did it. And my legs would have been
Hmm.
shaking if I did.
They
So,
would have. And so this is kind of the start, though, of Elvis starting to perform in front of people, whether it's, like I said, we are talking about his classmates, his family, church. And so we get to 1945. Elvis is 10 years old and he performs in front of his class. And then he is then taken to the principal to perform a very notable song that I've always said is not my favorite, but it seems to have stuck with Elvis, and that is Old Shep. And after the principal heard him sing the song, he then entered Elvis into a radio contest at
I
the
actually believe
Mississippi.
the principal was a woman. I believe.
Oh, okay, she
Sorry,
did.
sorry.
She,
She,
she entered him into the Mississippi Alabama State Fair.
right. And he sang Old Faithful, Old Shep.
Yes.
That's his fave. And according
Hmm.
to Peter
And he,
Guralnick, who is the biographer, sort of the definitive biographer for Elvis, he won
yes.
fifth place when he was 10, singing Old
Yeah.
Shep, this song about a dead dog.
Yeah.
It's
And
giving
it
Old
stuck.
Yeller.
It's giving that, and it stuck with him,
Yep, he
whether we like
recorded
it or
it.
not.
He
Hmm.
recorded it on his second album,
Yep.
and
Titled
released it,
Elvis,
titled
1956.
Elvis.
Yep.
He hit him with Old Shep, old classic, old
Hmm.
faithful.
He's like, I can't forget my roots, and he brought it back.
And then after this performance, we have another very notable event in Elvis's
Yes.
life, which is his first guitar.
Hmm. So this was for his birthday. So he would be 11 years old. So we're talking January 8th, 1946. So Elvis, as it's told, he wanted a bike, but he did not
Mhm.
get a bike. Instead, he got a guitar. And for me, I think this is Gladys must have been picking up on something. If we're having, you see your son, he's getting up in church and he's singing with the congregation. He's like being moved by the music. You
And
have,
he's singing Old Shep.
he's singing Old Shep and he's like, you know what? I can do it better than that guy. And he did. I think she noticed something. And so
Right.
instead, she got the guitar.
Right. So he wanted a bike. Story has, I mean, Gladys was a very
Yep.
doting mother, very attentive to her son. That's a whole topic for another day that a lot of people have a lot of thoughts on.
Yeah.
But she was afraid that her son would get injured. So at the Tupelo hardware store, they
Yep.
bought a guitar instead. And it was either
Hmm.
$7.75 or $12.95. It is not clear precisely how much. Multiple sources say different things, but it's somewhere between that amount.
Yeah. And so, again, wanting to be the real history nerd, we want to kind of put in perspective for you. So, $7.79 or $12.85, somewhere in between that, with the inflation calculator, looking at it today, that's going to be around $124.86 to about $208.64, which is a lot of money when you are, you're a very poor family during coming off of the Great Depression. it's a lot of money. And in 1947, according to Elvis Day by Day, the Presleys were making a combined income of $1,913.29. And thinking about that in today's context, that is only $26,951.42.
Right.
So,
So we're throwing a lot of numbers at you, but all
yes.
of that is to say that the Presleys spent
Hmm.
a significant chunk of their income on buying a birthday gift for their son.
Yeah.
Um, and to us, we thought that that really signified both their belief in the importance of music, if they were willing to
Hmm.
spend that much money on a guitar, and
Yeah.
that they didn't take it as just a silly thing. And I know that then later he learned guitar from his uncle.
Hmm.
He learned how to play, and he said he was never that great of a player. He could only play three chords, but you know what? He played more than three chords. But anyway, that they must have found something, worthy in
Hmm.
putting that much of their income towards their son's
Yep.
musical endeavors. As much as he wanted the bike, I do believe he got it like right before they left Tupelo to move to Memphis.
Hmm.
There's that famous picture of him with his bike outside the Tupelo hardware store.
Yeah.
So
So it's just like another year or two later.
yeah, a year or two
Yeah.
later. But it's so fascinating that this poor family who they always had food to
Hmm.
eat, but they moved from house to house and didn't really settle anywhere, because they didn't really have very good income. Both parents were working. Neither Gladys nor Vernon graduated from high school.
Hmm.
And, they spent that much money on a guitar for
Yeah.
their son. And, if they didn't, things would be different, wouldn't be here now. But
Absolutely. But we are because
we
Gladys
are,
Gladys bought that guitar.
period.
Period. Um, all right. So keeping with our little chronological theme here. So at the age of 13, the Presleys moved to Memphis,
Memphis, the big
yeah,
town.
the big
It's a
town.
3 hour drive
Hmm.
from Tupelo, which I'm sure anyone who's been to Elvis Week or has been to Graceland and also gone to Tupelo has done that drive. I haven't done it yet. I'm very excited to do it the next time I go.
Yes.
Um, but this family, the Presleys, left kind of abruptly. They didn't really put in notice.
Mhm.
They just left, drove, and joined some other family members up in Memphis.
Yeah. And so, kind of giving you a little bit more context. So, the whole point, I really feel like, with the Presleys moving was to find more opportunities, and there were in Tupelo. And so, more numbers. During this time frame, what we said before, the unemployment rate was around 20% during 1938. Now, the unemployment rate is only down to 4% post-war. So, this is during the Truman presidency. And like I said, the Presleys are there. They're searching for more opportunities. They're looking to find jobs and to prosper, really.
And this move, I mean, changed everything. We all
Oh, yeah.
know Memphis is where Elvis considered his home. He was
Hmm.
from Tupelo, but Memphis was his home
Yep,
and where he lived until he died. So this move was huge, signaled a change in everything.
I did.
And when they first moved to Memphis, they lived multiple different places with the family
Hmm.
members, the Presley family members who had already moved up there. Um, and then eventually in 1949, September
Hmm.
1949, they moved into Lauderdale Courts.
Yes. And so Lauderdale Courts was a former apartment complex. It was a housing project that was designed kind of as it was a supplement for people of low income. It was part of, to create more prosperity from that post-war and Great Depression era.
Yeah, it was part of the New Deal housing agreement,
Yes.
I believe. And this was, one of the first places that the Presleys
Hmm.
really had to call their own. I think it was like 2 bedrooms, which is crazy exciting.
Yeah.
Um, they all had their own space, and Elvis lived
Hmm.
also with his paternal grandmother, Dodger,
Yep. Mini
Minnie
May.
Mae,
Yeah.
Minnie Mae Presley, who he
Yep.
called affectionately Dodger.
Dodger.
So it was a pretty tight knit family unit.
Hmm.
They were pretty small, it's just Vernon,
Hmm.
Gladys, and Elvis. And so then they had other family members who were with them most of the time.
And so now we're still talking about Elvis getting his start. And so now that he's at Lauderdale Courts, he's got his guitar and he would start, kind of just practicing and performing a little bit, maybe for like small groups here and there at Lauderdale Courts.
Mm-hmm.
And it is quoted as saying, former residents remember foremost that Elvis liked to sing and play guitar. He practiced in the basement and performed for neighbors on the front steps of his building. And this is from the sign that's located at Lauderdale Courts.
Yeah, so I just think that's really interesting that he was known
Yeah.
to be shy, but people kind of remember
Mm-hmm.
him as playing music and creating music.
Mm-hmm.
He was said to have liked the echo effect that he got in the stairwells in the
Yeah.
chamber sort of sound. And I'm sure people are like, even if they don't remember, they're like, yeah, I totally remember him
Yeah,
being here because you would want to for sure.
exactly. I mean, you're gonna want to remember the king before he became the king.
Right. And I believe he still had that guitar, the same guitar
Yeah.
from the Tupelo hardware, and he didn't get a new one until after That's All Right came out.
Yeah, we'll
Um,
have to check into more of like the guitar
yeah,
history, I think, in the
I'm. I
future.
think. I think I've read that somewhere, which I think is, it showed that he valued it.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
but
I mean, also I think that goes like culturally, we're still talking about these weren't a very privileged family back in the day. So I feel like probably even getting like a new guitar is probably something that's a little bit unreasonable.
right,
Yeah. But going back to like the whole shyness, so he was known as the shy kid. He was known to be just a little bit different, especially when he was in Hume's High. He had the ducktails, he had the sideburns. He never wore jeans because, it reminded him, no jeans. It reminded him of the poor conditions that they came from in Tupelo, Mississippi. So it's very notorious that he would like to, instead of jeans, he would like to wear his black pants with a nice pink stripe down the side.
yep. His favorite
Yeah,
colors at the
his
time were
favorite color.
pink and black, so
Yes.
it made him a target for some bullying.
Mhm.
And Red West comes into that. We will discuss at a
Yep,
later date.
we will.
But for now, we're just going to read a little something from George Klein's book, Elvis, My Best Man.
Hmm.
So he is quoted as saying about the senior year talent show that when Elvis got up on stage at the talent show and sang, you guessed it,
Old
Old
Shep.
Shep,
Mm.
it was clear that he had something special. He sang with such raw emotion and authenticity that it left the entire audience, including myself, mesmerized. Even then, it was obvious that he had a unique gift that went beyond just being a good singer.
Absolutely. Even with Old Shep, he was able to captivate that audience instead of leaving them in tears.
Yeah, it said that he left them in tears because they were just thinking about, their dead dog.
Yeah. Mm.
I get it.
Hey,
Everyone has
I get
that
it.
childhood pet. Everyone has that childhood pet. R.I.P. Percy, my king.
Oh.
Um, no, please. That dead dog is my Roman Empire. So
Oh
he probably would have
goodness.
made me cry with Old Shep too.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna lie. If it's on, I have to turn it. I can't. It just he's saying with such emotion. I can't.
I know you'd think it was
Mm,
about like grief to do with his mother later on,
yeah,
but nah, he's singing about
and
a dog.
he's singing about a dog, and it actually something we can talk about. But I didn't even feel like he experienced that much grief at that point because this is like 1956 when he officially put it on a record.
Right.
But he still sang it with like such emotion, and just like George Klein was talking about, it's just going to mesmerize you. It's going to leave you in tears. I
Right.
feel like that was a little bit kind of another like inclination, like he's got something. He's got something that's going to carry him on for life.
That was the power
Yeah.
behind his voice and his
Hmm.
talent was that, I've always said
Yeah,
when Elvis feels it, you can hear it. And even
you
if he's
can.
singing about a dog, you can hear it for sure.
Exactly. Hmm. And so, yeah, so we're looking at Hume's High. We got his classmates, George Klein, even, who notices that he's got, something going for him. And, this is senior year. What happens after senior year, or what happens just after you graduate? The question is, what are you going to do next?
The existential dread,
The
we've all been there.
existential. Yep. Doesn't matter, high school or college. What are you doing next? Every parent stop the question.
And also bear in mind that Elvis was the first person in his family to graduate from high school.
Yep.
Neither of his parents graduated from high
Mm-hmm.
school. So this was a very big event in terms of education and sort of marked,
Mm-hmm.
a new chapter for the Presley family in terms of
Yeah.
moving forward. And I feel like it had to have solidified some of their intent behind moving to Memphis that, now
Mm-hmm.
their son graduated from high school, but once he graduated, what the heck is he doing now? So
Exactly. So, and from a 1978 article, it's actually from Good Housekeeping, I believe. Vernon's giving an interview, and in this interview, he says, "Until he was nearly grown, I had no idea what Elvis was planning to do with his future. It turned out that he wasn't too sure either. I remember right after graduation from high school, I went into his room and found him lying on his bed. Son, I asked, what do you want to do now? Do you want to go to college? Because if you do, we'll manage to send you. Do you want to go to work? What do you want to do next?" Well, Elvis told me later those questions like to have scared him to death because they brought him to the realization that he had to make a decision. Then he told me, "Daddy, I want to be an entertainer. I want to sing with the gospel quartets. You do whatever you want to do," I said, "and we'll help you all we can."
right. And Elvis had been
Yeah.
working from when he was 15 or 16 years old. He
Mm-hmm.
started working at the movie theater first
Yeah.
as an usher. And
Yes.
then at this point, once he had graduated, he was working at Crown Electric,
He was
um,
the truck driver.
truck driver for Crown
Mm-hmm.
Electric. And Elvis says, and I got wired the wrong way, baby.
Oh, yes.
Rizzing everyone up from the start.
Oh, yes. He knew what he was doing. From the moment of Old Chip, he was just raising them up.
Yeah, he was like, I can make the girlies cry, but with
Watch
old
me.
Shep, watch
Mm-hmm.
me. Definitely didn't
Watch me.
hurt that he was, conventionally attractive.
It didn't hurt. No, it didn't.
No,
Not one bit. If anything, it helped.
it definitely helped.
It did.
But, he experienced that like he didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that the one thing he did say was that he wanted to join a gospel quartet.
Mm-hmm.
It just shows how important gospel music was to him and his
Yeah.
family. And he wanted to be an entertainer in some
Mm-hmm.
capacity, but I don't know that he was able to imagine a world where he could be an entertainer for anything that wasn't like gospel related.
Yeah. And also, I think there wasn't really any path set for him. He was the one who paved the way.
Right.
There was nobody who ended up being on the same level as Elvis Presley was.
Right.
So he really was the first. And I feel like there was just no way for him to imagine, okay, this is what my life could be like.
Right. There were no pop star. I mean, there was like the Rat Pack and there was,
Yeah.
Frank Sinatra, but it wasn't the
Mm.
same. And
No,
he
nowhere
paved the way
close.
for like the Beatles and the Beatlemania and
Exactly.
everything like that. And there certainly weren't people, white guys from Tupelo who had moved to Memphis, who grew up in
Yeah,
an Assembly of God church, who were then bigger than life. I mean, there weren't
exactly.
those examples for him. So,
No.
and now we
So
get to the good stuff.
we do.
Not that this other stuff
It's
wasn't
all
good.
good.
It's all
But
good.
we're getting to the juicy bits
Now we're getting
if you
into
want
the
to.
like how he got his start,
Yes, the things that I think most people know.
Yes.
Yes.
So tell me about it. July
All
18th,
right.
1953.
July
What goes
18th,
on?
1953, we're at Sun Records. So Sun Records had kind of two components to it. We had the Sun recording service, and then you had actual Sun studios where Sam Phillips was, creating records for his Sun label. So July 18th, 1953, Elvis sees an ad for the Memphis recording service. Okay. It's on Union
Right.
Avenue, Sun Records, and he
And
sees it.
And from this little ad,
Yeah.
it's, advertising recording services.
Yeah.
And it says over 12 years experience, personal recordings, commercial discs, masters made for processing, air checks. We are experts, not amateurs. Fine equipment, modern studios at 706 Union Avenue.
And as I said, we all know Sam Phillips wrote that himself.
Had
That's
to.
had to. That just sounds like the way he would talk. I don't picture Marion, just jotting that down.
Yeah.
Feeling that sounds good. But
Right.
that's
And so
that's
they had Sun Records, which
mm-hmm.
was Sam Phillips record label, and Memphis Recording Service, which
Yeah.
was where they would record things, basically how they made their
Hmm.
money
To
when
support the records. Yeah,
to support their record label.
correct. So we're talking about why Sam Phillips needed that support is he was looking to, I guess, find like a niche in a way, try to find something that was not out there, something that was going to sell. And so what he wanted to do was something called race records. He wanted kind of, rhythm and blues that was really prevalent within the African American culture. That was the music they loved. And he wanted to find a way to promote that into the wider population.
Right.
Okay.
And he was making records, all of these quote unquote race records,
Mm-hmm.
at the time that Elvis first went into Sun.
Yep.
And he would have probably heard these records. He probably would
Mm-hmm.
have heard of Sam Phillips. Memphis is a big city, but it's a small city, really.
Small, yeah.
Um,
Everybody knows somebody.
Everybody knows somebody, and I think with the
Mm-hmm.
music community, it was pretty tight knit at the time. Um, but Sam Phillips was trying to do his thing. He was trying to release music by Black artists,
Yep.
and it wasn't necessarily paying the bills.
Yep.
So that's a whole other
So
topic.
it is. And so that's the whole point of like the $4 come in and record whatever you want. And so Elvis sees this ad. He says, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to take my $4 and I'm going to record two songs. And that was My Happiness. And that's when my heartaches begin.
Right. And so he recorded an acetate, and the first
Mm-hmm.
person to ever record Elvis Presley's voice was Marian Keisker,
Yes,
our queen.
she
Um,
is.
she's getting her own series. Love her.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we'd be here without her.
No, we wouldn't be.
We wouldn't be.
And she was Sam Phillips' assistant, but she
Mm-hmm.
also later on had like her own radio show and was an
Yep.
important person in her own right. Um, but she is the one who recorded Elvis singing My Happiness, and that's when your heartaches begin for $3.98.
Yes. And when Elvis went in to record this, as said before by Vernon, he is not a trained musician. Elvis couldn't read music. He never did. And so he kind of just went in there with his basic skills that his uncle had taught him or things that he just picked up along the way and just started singing My Happiness.
Right. And it was just him and his guitar.
Yeah.
Ernst Jorgensen says in A Life in Music that that day, with only the most fundamental of guitar skills, Elvis strummed and sang a 20-year-old ballad called My Happiness, following it up with the 1951 Ink Spots hit, That's When Your Heartaches Begin. The sound must have been exactly what his family, friends, and neighbors had been listening to for years, while the repertoire reflected a music business where the lines of genre, race, and social origin were already being blurred.
Yep. And so now we kind of get into why did he make this record? So it is always believed that Elvis made this record as a gift for his mother. But as we come to find out, Elvis's mother's birthday was actually April 25th.
Right. So the story that everyone knows is that he went and
Mhm.
recorded this for his mother. We're not saying it's implausible that he recorded this for his
Yes.
mother because they were very close. He might have just wanted to
Mhm.
give her a gift. He might have just wanted to
Like
hear
a
how
just
his
because
voice
gift.
sounded. Right, just because.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah. And we are not saying that it wasn't for his mother,
We're not
but it's
saying.
just interesting
Yeah, we're giving you
Gladys's
all of the
birthday,
information.
that Gladys's birthday was way before that.
Mhm.
And then a little something George Klein has to say about this.
Yes. So George Klein, in his book Elvis, My Best Man, if you haven't read it, you really should. He gives us all the information. He said Elvis's family didn't have a record player in their home. When we were kids, Elvis would come over to my house and I'd play records for him. He was fascinated by the music and would listen intently, soaking it all in. It was one of the ways he developed his love for music and became so knowledgeable about it.
Right. So if one of his close friends is saying that he was knowledgeable about music,
Hmm.
I think it's a evident that he would have known who
Yeah.
Sam Phillips was. And B, if they didn't have a record player in their home, obviously he knew that, you
Yeah.
know.
So it's kind of like the question is, what did they do with this record after he recorded it? How did they play it? How did Gladys listen to it? If it was a gift for her? We're
Right.
just throwing about all the questions we have, all of the
Yeah.
facts.
And it was
Yeah.
this recording that, so Sam Phillips wasn't there. Mariette Keisker recorded
Hmm.
it, and she made a note that Elvis was a quote, good ballad singer. And it is on this day that she asked Elvis, who, well, you want to sing something, who do you sound
Hmm.
like? And he said, well, I don't sound like anybody.
And we know he didn't.
He didn't. He sounded
He
like
didn't.
an amalgamation of all these different people, Mario Lanza and the
Exactly.
gospel singers he loved. I mean,
All the people who over the years have had an influence on him.
mm-hmm.
And so I was just saying, after this first incident, it wasn't like immediately Sam Phillips was like knocking on his door, being like, hey, we want you to come back and record for us. It was a few years and several attempts of Elvis wanting to record that, he would go in with his, stop by with his Crown Electric truck and be like, hey,
Yeah.
has Sam going to reach out to me soon? I'm still here. I'm still interested. And so it was a long time before he
Yeah.
was actually invited back.
So it was a whole year after he had graduated from high
Mm-hmm.
school that he was basically for a year consistently like going in and just being
Yeah.
like, hey. And
I'm still here.
he recorded a second acetate on January
Mm-hmm.
4th, 1954. So just before
Yep.
his 19th birthday.
Oh,
He
yeah.
recorded I'll Never Stand in Your Way and It Wouldn't Be the Same Without You. And this is another quote from Jorgensen saying in A
Mm-hmm.
Life of Music. This time he chose a new pop song from Joni James, I'll Never Stand in Your Way, which was also out in a country version. For the other side, Elvis sang It Wouldn't Be the Same Without You from a record by the respected country singer Jimmy Wakely. And apparently his voice hadn't really developed much. He hadn't
Mm-hmm.
really changed his tone. He was now
Yep.
trying to record country music and maybe see like if that would work. I do appreciate his willingness to try these different genres, and still Sam Phillips was like not impressed. And shortly
Yep.
afterwards, he had an audition for the vocal group, the Songfellows, and was rejected, which was a big blow, I
Mm-hmm.
think, to his confidence.
Especially when that was his original goal, talking to his dad, like, I want to be a part of a gospel group.
Right. And then to get turned down and also to have,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to go into this studio and save his money from working and pay for this acetate to be made. And it's just him and his guitar and
Yep.
he's singing, and to not really get anything out of it. He must have had to have some persistence, is all I'm saying, to keep
Some
going back
persistence.
on in,
Yes.
because
He never let him get it
July
down.
he never let it get him down. He
No.
must have believed in himself in some capacity, even if,
Yep.
other people didn't
Yes.
see it from the beginning.
Let's see it yet.
See it yet. They saw it
Yet. They
later.
saw it later, which eventually we're now moving all the way forward to July 5th, 1954. So Tessa, what
Mm-hmm.
happened July 5th, 1954? That
Big
hot
things.
July day.
That hot July day, I
Yes.
am not envious of people in Memphis for Elvis Week, only because I know how hot
Yeah.
it is. And me personally, I'm pretty sweaty and I don't need that. But I still want
Thank
to
you for that
go.
information.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't be able to wear this gray shirt. I'm just saying
No,
it's
dark
hot,
colors
like
only.
dark colors only. Um, Elvis was sweaty too. I mean,
We know
really
that. We
recognize.
do.
Yeah,
Hmm.
he kept his room nice and chilly. I'm just
Yeah.
saying,
And he had
real
all those
recognizes
nice
real.
scarves to get that nice perspiration off.
Perspiration.
Yeah. Hmm.
I think tangent. Um,
Tangent. It's
but
fine.
okay, now, okay, locking in back to July 5th,
July 5th, 1950. Yeah.
1954. Okay, he went back into
Yep.
Sun, same old thing.
Yeah.
And he
At this time though,
records,
he's with Scotty and he's with Bill.
he is with Scotty Moore and Bill Black, who are the studio musicians at Sun Studios. Scotty Moore played guitar and Bill
Hmm.
Black played upright bass. So on these tracks, we had Elvis on vocals, Elvis on guitar, Scotty Moore
Hmm.
on guitar, and Bill on the upright bass. And they recorded Harbor Lights, which is a really interesting track if you guys
Yeah.
get a chance to listen
I
to
love
it.
that one.
Yeah, me too. It's hashtag underrated.
It
Um,
is.
they had 8 takes of that one. I Love You Because, which had
Hmm.
5 takes. And then, drum roll please, That's All Right, which was only 4 takes.
Yes. And so we got a quote here. Got to use those sources. The session held the evening. The session held the evening of July 5th proved entirely unfruitful until late in the evening, as they were about to abort and go home. Presley took his guitar and launched into a 1946 blues number. Author Crudup's "That's All Right." Moore recalled, all of a sudden, Elvis just started singing this song, jumping around and acting like a fool. And then Bill picked up his bass and he started acting the fool. And I started playing with them. Sam, I think, had the door in the control booth opened. He stuck his head out and said, "What are you doing?" And we said, "We don't know." "Well, back up," he said. "Try to find a place and start and do it again." Phillips quickly began taping. This was the sound he had been looking for. 3 days later, popular Memphis DJ Dewey Phillips, no
No
relation.
relation, no
Yeah,
relation.
no relation.
Every book
Um,
ever always has to say
every
it.
book.
Sam Phillips, Dewey
Phillips, no
Phillips, no
Phillips, no
relation,
relation. Yeah.
no
All right.
relation.
DJ Dewey Phillips played "That's All Right" on his Red Hot and Blue show. Listeners began phoning in, eager to find out who the singer was. The interest was such that Phillips played the record repeatedly during the remaining 2 hours of his show.
Right. And so this was
So,
from Scotty Moore, who was the guitarist on the track for That's All Right.
yes.
Um, and That's All Right. I mean, what an interesting thing to have kind of pulled out of nowhere. Um,
Yeah.
it was a blues hit. If you listen to the original version, the
Mm-hmm.
lyrics are much more sexually laden,
Yes.
a little more, you know,
Risque, shall we
risque
say?
indeed. And I think some of that in the 2022 Elvis movie shows it pretty
Yeah,
well, how that was an influence and,
exactly.
that it, integrating That's All Right with Black Snake Moan and all of these other
Mm-hmm.
things. There's a lot of interesting history behind that song. And I just am so desperate to know how Elvis like first heard that song and what made him think like, oh, let me sing
Yeah.
this
Which was
ditty.
something I think, all the guys along with Elvis, so we're talking Sam, Scotty, and Bill, were kind of like, where did you hear that song from? What made you decide to pull that out? And it might be something that we never know,
Right. But it changed everything. And it
but it
was
changed
just,
everything.
and somehow his interpretation of that song, his ability to
Hmm.
change and put his own spin on this blues
Yeah.
song by a black artist and
Hmm.
sort of infuse it with this country. And then you have Bill on the bass hitting it with that slapping rhythm
Yeah.
that makes the whole, that is the rock
Hmm.
roll. Like it is, that is what it is. And
Exactly.
it's basically Bill and Elvis's voice is on top of, all these elements
Hmm.
that came together. And it's just, I don't think it would have been possible
Yeah.
without his specific upbringing, his specific
No.
experiences. I mean, all of us could probably create something that was unique to ourselves,
Hmm.
based on our experiences. But I don't know that all of us would be called the king or queen or monarch of whatever it is that we're trying to do. Um,
Yes. And I think that brings us, would you like to read our next quote?
sure.
Right.
So this is from Mike Gator's book, Elvis Music FAQ. So he says, this is what started it all, referring to That's All Right. Elvis's first record may not have been the debut of rock and roll music, but it was the catalyst for much of the subsequent upheaval in the youth culture of the 50s. There was a new kind of freedom to be found in the performances, an element of joyously breaking the restrictions of what was then the norm. If it was decided on spontaneously, That's All Right carries with it a sense of purpose. I doubt Elvis, Scotty, and Bill knew exactly how to classify what they were doing, yet they did realize that it was worth pursuing in that it was different.
Yeah. And kind of like they were saying, like, this is different. And I think that attributes to its success. Like we said, Sam Phillips was looking for something different, something that was going to appeal to a wide audience instead of a small section of the population. Talking about the youth culture, I think a lot of the youth at the time were looking for something to call their own, something to define their generation, and to kind of just even like break away. Like you said, you had like the Rat Pack of the day. You had like Sinatra, Dean Martin,
Like,
They
this is
had
not
a
your parents' music.
this is
This is
not your parents'
something,
music,
yeah.
correct. And I think that's what a lot of Elvis spoke to that generation. And I think that's really what made That's All Right catch on. It was something different, something that they saw as their own.
Right. And even just talking about how Dewey Phillips played. So it was on the 8th
Exactly.
of July, 1954, that he just
Hmm.
played it like nonstop, back to back to
For
back.
like 2 hours.
Right. And you were saying about how Dewey was known for like adding commentary.
Hmm. So yeah, like usually this is something that also is mentioned in George Klein's book is yeah, so usually back in the day you would put a record on and you would kind of talk over it, giving an advertisement sometimes. And people would be calling in like, "Hey, I want to listen to it, but I don't want you to talk over it. I need to hear this whole song." And the other aspect was they would play it for 2 hours. George Klein also talks about that's kind of like a no-no in the disc jockey area. You would not play a song 2 hours straight over and over and over and over again.
In this moment, like,
Okay.
this is a dumb moment, but I just realized that DJ meant disc jockey. I'm 25 years old. I have a literal master's degree in music, and in this
They never taught
precise
you that?
moment, no, it just clicked.
Yeah, DJ, disc
Yeah, I
jockey.
get it now.
Oh,
Sometimes, do you ever have those
see?
moments where you're just like, wait,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh,
See, that's the point of the podcast. We learn
I'm
something
learning.
new.
Yeah, I'm learning new
You all
things.
learn something new. Everybody's learning. It's
And if
great.
you didn't know that DJ stood for disc jockey, just know you're not alone.
Yep. You're welcome.
Thanks.
But no, so it really took, and I also think like the culmination of this one event, you have, like I said, going all the way back from the beginning, what we were talking about in Tupelo. You have Tupelo growing up in these poor environments, being surrounded by both whites and African Americans. You're going to church, you're grabbing that culture. Then you're moving to Memphis, who at the time, and even it was like the birth, I feel like at that time when they moved, was the music scene. The music scene was growing there. So you're
Right.
surrounded
It's
by all
the
these
home of the
different,
blues, the home of the
yes,
blues, and
you're surrounded by all these different musical influences. And now you're going to high school, you're performing, you're obviously a little different. Um, the Presleys kind of moved around still also when they were in Memphis.
mhm.
And now you're listening to the radio, you're listening to Red Hot and Blue, where Dewey Phillips is playing some of sometimes controversial records, what like Sam Phillips would call race records. But it was the thing that appealed to the youth at the time. And so Elvis is being influenced by that. He sees the advertisement, that advertisement draws him in. And now you have Sam Phillips saying, I'm going to put that on a record. You have Dewey Phillips, I'm playing that on the radio. And now you have the entire, I would say, teenage population of Memphis that are just gravitating towards him. And I think that's what you could call like the big boom of rock and
Right.
roll.
And it was such a local phenomenon
It
start
was.
at the beginning. It
Mm-hmm.
was these youth in Memphis who felt like, oh, this is someone who either they went to
Correct.
high school with him, or they went to a high school near him, or they knew the high school
Mm-hmm.
that he went to, or they'd seen
Exactly.
him because he was different. And
Mm-hmm.
this was a very much local thing at the beginning, that it was a hometown, you
Like your
know,
hometown hero.
culture, hometown hero, hometown culture
Yep.
that he tapped into, that he was able to communicate with, both poor white
Mm-hmm.
people, poor black people, um, people who liked country, people who liked blues, people who liked gospel.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things were, you know, put into this one record.
Yes.
And
They were all kind of like I said, we're talking about like the big boom of rock and roll. You're
yeah,
having all these different catalysts that come together to create one thing.
right. And it's not necessarily that he was the only one who was doing this. It was just the most successful, and
He was there in the right time, right place.
right time, right place, right
Yes.
person, right circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
right looks. Very
Exactly.
much. He was white. He was attractive. All of these are important factors in who he ended up being, and how
Correct.
That's All Right became such a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love this quote from that Ernst Jorgensen guy, that, you know, it got started with clowning around. So this is the quote:
Yeah.
clowning around was definitely second nature to both Elvis and Bill. So it shouldn't have been much of a surprise when the two of them started fooling around with the familiar blues song, Arthur, Big Boy Crudups, That's All Right. When the normally reserved Scotty joined in, Sam sensed that the patient's part of his job was over. This was something truly unexpected, something original. It had a logic of its own. Even if Sam recognized elements that were borrowed from his own recordings of Jackie Brenston or Junior Parker, it was the something different he'd been looking for. The beat, the music had always been lacking. And without hesitating, Sam finally made his move.
He did it.
He did it, and he was Elvis's first manager, Sam
Yep.
Phillips. No relation to
Mm-hmm.
Dewey Phillips.
No relation.
No relation to Dewey Phillips. So that is where we're leaving you off for
Yeah,
how Elvis got his start.
exactly. And you learned a little bit about us, I think, along the way.
You learned that
Tessa.
I didn't know what DJ meant.
Exactly. That's what.
That was the main
All learned
takeaway.
something. That was the main takeaway.
Yeah. And so something we want to do at the end of every episode is we want to
Mm-hmm.
have an Elvis or non-Elvis song of the episode. We're going to make a
Yeah.
playlist on Spotify of these songs, so you
Yes.
guys can listen afterwards. It's like your little homework until the next episode.
Mm-hmm.
So homework for this episode is listen to Arthur Crudup's version of That's All Right and listen to Elvis's version of That's All Right.
Yeah.
Tell us your thoughts, feelings, emotions. Which do you prefer? I need
Yeah.
why. Don't just be like Elvis
And
because
why? Yeah.
yeah, Elvis because he's
Because it's
Elvis. Like
Elvis.
I think there's
Or what did you prefer from one versus the other? Kind of like movies to books. What did you prefer
right,
about the original versus what did you prefer about the adaptation?
right. I mean, it was an adaptation, and let's
Mm-hmm.
give Arthur Crudup his due.
Yep.
Without him, none of this would be happening. Wouldn't be doing all this. So
Yes. Absolutely. There's lots of people that we have to give credit to. We got Arthur, we got Marion,
mm-hmm,
Elvis, obviously, Sam Phillips.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. His
It took
uncle who
his
taught him
uncle,
guitar.
yep, Gladys, obviously, and Vernon.
Yeah, that Orville Bean guy who gave the Presleys money to build that house
Yeah.
in Tupelo.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, George, shout out to George
George.
Klein.
Exactly.
That's my class president for real.
He's my class president too. But
So
yeah,
that is it. That is the
that
end
is
of our
it.
very first episode of the Chronicles of the King podcast.
Mm-hmm. So we're hoping you guys are going to tune in next time for a topic that will be determined soon.
Yes, and
Yes.
research.
And
We
researched. Thoroughly
swear.
researched.
Yes, might even have a
Yes.
guest star. We don't know yet.
We don't know.
Working on it.
Working on it, we shall see.
We shall see.
Yeah.
But
And
anyway,
then let us know if there's any other topics that you would like us to cover, certain things about Elvis that you really want to learn about. So we're open to suggestions.
absolutely. We want this to be a little bit collaborative, but
Mm-hmm.
hopefully not too much of our personalities. Just kidding.
Yes. Just
kidding. We want you to know who we are and our personality. But we also want to share the information that we've learned in an
Correct.
accurate and well-researched manner. So
Mm-hmm.
keep taking care of business, kiddos.
Yes. TLC from us to
TLC.
you.
All
All right.
See you next
Bye.
time. Bye.
Bye.